Hi, we're back again, AMS on the Air, with our live podcasting taping going on right here at the registration desk at our biggest annual meeting ever. 6,000 attendees and celebrating a centennial. And I'm very, very honored to have with me Paulo Artaxo from Sao Paulo, Brazil, the university there. And Paulo, you've got a really interesting abstract, which is why we asked you to come here. So thank you very much, first of all, for joining us.
It's nice to talk to you and all the other people here.
Great. I'm just really fascinated by, first of all, this year was a big year for the Amazon in terms of the forest fires and the international attention they got. So maybe you could explain a little bit, first of all, the importance of those events in terms of the overall context of where the Amazon is going and changing.
Yeah, 2019, we defined first in Siberia in January, then in Amazonia in July, and now in Australia. Was a really, really very strong year for biomass burning. But they have different reasons for burning in Australia, in the boreal forest, and also in Amazonia. In Amazonia, the 30% increase in burnings in 2019 compared to previous years was done by changes in the Brazil government, because we have a new government that actually is favoring Amazonian deforestation, making incentives for the people to invade public lands, and these have resulted in a very significant increase in both deforestation and also biomass burning.
Now, how fast was deforestation occurring before this current political environment?
Brazil has a long history of deforestation, of course, but also has a history of success. In 2004, Brazil was deforesting 28,000 square kilometers of primary forest per year. This was reduced to 4,000 square kilometers per year in 2012. So this shows that it's possible to reduce deforestation very significant. Does not cost a lot of money, but you need the political will to do that. So what happens is that in the last 5 years, sequentially, biomass burning is increasing. So right now in 2019 was 10,000 square kilometers. So it is still lower than in the 80s, but is extremely high, especially because Brazil have to reduce biomass burning emissions significantly, according to our INDC from the Paris Agreement.
So what part of the emissions from Brazil are deforestation, are the consequences of deforestation?
All emissions that we are talking about are associated with deforestation in Amazonia. So basically what happened is that in July and August we have a very record year of deforestation. So as I mentioned, 10,000 square kilometers per year is the highest number over the last 5-7 years. And then this deforestation resulted in a huge number of forest fires. This year, Brazil have a record forest fire detection. So it was about 180,000 individual fires detected in Amazonia. It's a huge amount, and all of them associated with deforestation.
So I understand that deforestation occurs to some degree because directly because of fires. In other words, burning is how the forest is removed, but there's more to it than that, apparently.
No,
there's
actually it's the
secondary
reverse.
consequence.
The fires are a consequence from deforestation. Mm-hmm. So the tropical rainforest does not burn itself. Actually, it's very difficult to burn. It's not like in Australia where you have dry climate. Then you get a significant increase in burning. But the forest in Amazonia rains so much, 1,000 millimeters per year to 3,500 millimeters per year, that the forest itself does not burn. Actually, it's very difficult to burn the forest itself.
So the burning that farmers do or others do is like on the edge of the forest, then, right? Rather than
is on the edge of the forest, where you have access by roads and so on. So first you deforest the forest, let's say in May and June, then let the trunks and the remaining leaves dry out for 4 months, and then you start flammable conditions. So and then you start biomass burning in September September and beginning of October. So this is how the dynamics of forest fires happens in Amazonia.
So the context of this deforestation is partly is political, right? The political drive to change the environment. But at the same time, the changing environment seems to be occurring on a larger scale. Like there's more to the change in the Amazon. What are some of the changes you're seeing in the environment right now? Because your abstract mentions a number of really key changes in how the Amazon is playing its role in various processes.
Exactly. What happened is that in January, Brazil had a new extremely right government that actually is against the rights of the indigenous people, is against the rights of preserving the Amazonia, is treated to get out of the Paris Agreement. Some of the policies are in alignment with the United States and extremely far-wing governments. So this, as a consequence, is not just deforestation, but also what is in danger is the right of indigenous people. There are right now about 60 to 70 indigenous land that were invaded by people, and the federal policy does not enforce the law. So actually it's a very serious situation in terms of Amazonia, and it can get much worse over the next 3 years during the government of this new far right-wing government.
So there's really no stop in sight in terms.
No, actually, for sure, it will get worse before it can improve. So we need international pressure who can help to preserve Amazonia, not just cash, but mostly political pressure on the Brazilian government in order to make the law applicable to Amazonia. So because we have very strong and very good environmental legislation, but the government right now does not enforce these laws in Amazonia.
We are familiar with these things here too, as you know.
Yes.
So is it a drive for commercialization, for profits, are there economic pressures that are at stake there?
Yeah, of course, the agro-business is a big pressure, for instance, and then the government, for example, open up sugarcane plantations in Amazonia, is trying to open up mining in indigenous land that will provoke, of course, invasion of activities that are completely against the natural scope of Amazonia, that is actually to explore its rich biodiversity, to explore the ecosystem service that the forest provides, not just to Brazil, but to the global climate. And of course, that's a very worrisome situation.
How would you characterize the role of the Amazon in the global climate?
We have done, together with the Princeton University, simulations about the world without Amazonia. So this simulation shows that if you deforest, let's say right now, Brazil have deforested 20% of the original forest. There is a threshold, and this threshold is about 40 to 50%, that if you deforested that much area in Amazonia, the remaining part of the forest could not sustain because of the hydrological regime. And basically, if you deforest the forest, this will increase CO2 concentrations in about 30 parts per million. This will increase the global temperature additionally 1.5 degrees. So it's a huge change in the global climate, and it can happen quickly. So of course the effect of the deforestation, it's very, very fast, and in 20 or 30 years we could have a even much worse situation with climate change than we have right now if you don't preserve the Amazonian properly.
Okay, so we're talking about the melting of ice caps and the melting of the green ocean at the same time, kind of.
Exactly. Of course, this will add up, with all the changes we are doing. But what is important to say is that, deforestation globally is responsible for 13 10% of the global emissions. It's important to remember that 87% of the emissions is caused by fossil fuel burning. If you don't stop fossil fuel burning, doesn't matter what you're going to do with Amazonia, because if you allow the temperature to go above 4 to 5 degrees above pre-industrial levels, the forest will not have the conditions to continue to survive.
So why is that? I mean, I don't associate like warmer temperatures with necessarily something bad for the tropics. So what happens? What's the chain
That's
there?
a good point. There are two main mechanisms. The first one is decreasing temperature in Amazonia. All the IPCC climate models shows that precipitation will decrease by as much as 30 to 40%, depending on the model, over Amazonia. And second, the increase in temperature can be around the 4 to 5 degrees. What happens is that photosynthesis has an optimum temperature range. And if you increase the temperature of the forest by more than 4 degrees, photosynthesis loses efficiency in the sense that the forest will not have the capability to sustain itself in terms of the basic hydrological and also radiation and photosynthesis systems. So it happens that it's called the forest dieback, and we are in the trajectory of a forest dieback with the current global emissions of greenhouse gases.
Now, so you mentioned the two things I want to follow up on that. First of all, increased temperatures are usually associated with more moisture in the air, right? So where does the decrease in precipitation happen?
Yeah, what happens is that, in some parts of the world, increasing temperature will increase atmospheric moisture, but in other parts will mean drier regions. And Amazonia and northeast Brazil is also one of these cases where all the models shows a decrease in precipitation with increase in temperature. Because of course the water vapor that falls down in some regions will not make rain in other parts of the world. And Amazonia is a particularly sensitive region for climate change.
Okay, and then the other thing you mentioned, this photosynthesis optimum. If anyone has an optimum, it would be the Amazon right now, right? I mean, that's the paragon of photosynthesis.
Of course,
on land at
the
least.
system have evolved, over millions and millions of years to the optimal use of radiation, precipitation, and so on. So if you change these conditions for less or more radiation, less or more higher temperature, of course you get the system out of their optimum, and this will make the system releases carbon to the atmosphere, aggravating the greenhouse effect. So basically, it's a situation that is really everybody will lose.
And you're already observing, it seems, real quickly, it seems like you're observing at this point that the Amazon has gone from a carbon sink to a carbon neutral already.
Exactly.
And what's the driver of that? Is that the man-made deforestation or some other
what's happening
factor?
is that Amazonia until 10 years ago was a very strong carbon sink, absorbing about 0.5 tons of carbon per hectare per year. But over the last 5 to 10 years, Amazonia became carbon neutral. One of the reasons for that is the increase in climate extremes over Amazonia. We have a very strong drought in 2005, another one in 2010, and a third in 2015. So these droughts brought hydrological stress to the ecosystem, and then the plants open less their stomata because they don't want to lose the precious water vapor to the atmosphere, and in this sense they do less photosynthesis, and so this reduces the net primary productivity of the forest. So this is already happening. So basically what we hope is that Amazonia could not become a source of CO2, losing biomass to the atmosphere, because this Amazonia stores about 110 gigatons of carbon in the ecosystem. That is about 10 times the amount of fossil fuel burning. So it's a huge amount of carbon that if it goes to the atmosphere quickly, bye-bye to all of us.
Well, I appreciate very much your warnings and your offer of suggestions on how we can help. And Paulo, I hope your presentation goes well, and also people attend and find out a little more about the incredible linkages between the Amazon and the clouds overhead, the pollution, the air quality, and the global climate. It's a fascinating topic. Thank you very much for being on
Thank
AMS
you.
on the
It was
Air.
very nice. It was a pleasure to talk to you and to all the people who are hearing us.
Thank you.